Hey everybody, welcome to Using My Story. My name is Isaac Martinez. I'm the founder of Using My Story, and today I'm excited to share my story with you. I became addicted immediately. After one hit of meth, it took over. That's all I wanted to do was smoke meth. And I still cared about graffiti, but meth was my main focus. I grew up with in a little bit of a rocky environment. My parents were both really hard workers. Um, I did struggle with my dad being gone quite a bit, and what happened was my brothers and sisters, mostly my brothers, they were constantly in and out of the home. Um, a lot of running away, a lot of foster care, a lot of prison, jail, addiction, gang activity, growing up in a rough neighborhood, all those kinds of things. I was able to kind of keep it together in most parts, as good as a little young boy could keep it together. Um, but I feel like I started struggling the most right around middle school. That's where I started getting involved with graffiti. I loved art. I used to take classes for calligraphy and art at East LA College. So growing up, I was always pretty creative. I always liked art and all those types of things. Um, and one time I ran into somebody at a bookstore, and his name was Carlos. Carlos was a beast. He was super good at drawing anime and a specific type of robotic characters, and he was an animal. And I was really into his work, so he told me, he's like, hey, I'll teach you everything I know. Actually, he used to draw for a comic book called Witchblade and the Darkness. He told me, I'll teach you everything I know, just promise me one thing. And I said, what's up? He said, just don't ever use it for graffiti. And I was like, all right, for sure. But by that time I was already into graffiti anyway. He started teaching me everything he knew and all the different types of um, you know strategies and different type of techniques to do good artwork. And when I went to high school, my main focus was graffiti. I loved graffiti. Anything that had to do with art, I loved it, but I was specifically drawn toward graffiti. And that's when I started to realize graffiti, drinking, smoking weed, not going to school, all of those things kind of blended together. And so I hadn't started smoking weed yet, but around my house, I was walking around one day and I saw my brother smoking some weed, and he's like, "You want to smoke some?" And I was like, "Nah, I'm good." And then anyway, I think I ended up smoking with him somehow, some way. So smoking weed was the first thing I ever did as far as substance abuse goes. So anyway, I kept going to school, kept smoking more weed. I got more and more addicted. And a lot of people don't think you can get addicted to weed, but personally, I did get addicted to weed, to the point where if I didn't smoke, I was getting depressed, I was getting anxious, I was getting aggravated, agitated. I was just unhappy unless I smoked. And so I slowly started to not go to school at all and just focus on graffiti, to the point where I became homeless for graffiti. Now, a lot of people say they go homeless for crack or heroin or other types of situations. I literally went homeless for graffiti. My mom gave me an ultimatum. She said, if you're gonna keep doing graffiti, you ain't gonna live here. So I was like, all right, I'll just be homeless then. And I just roamed the streets all night for a long time, not having much of a place to live, not having, sleeping in different houses, sleeping in different garages, just hanging out with my buddies that did graffiti. And we would just paint all night, trains and walls and all these different types of places. And that was just in that culture. Now, one day there was, back in those days, I know it's not like this now, but one day it was dry, and that's a word we used to use. I don't know if people use it anymore, but basically, when you say it's dry, that means there's no weed. You can't. Nobody's plugs have weed. Everybody's waiting for some. Nobody could find any, so it was super dry, and I ended up in East LA, and where I was always smoking weed and I was doing graffiti. I was loving life at that point. Even though I was homeless, I loved art and graffiti, so I was still real happy. Um, and what happened was there was no weed, and there was no weed, and I always wanted to make sure I smoked weed religiously. So I always wanted to make sure there was never a day that passed by where I didn't smoke no weed. Well, it was late that day, and this day was about to be my first day in a long time where I didn't get high. So one of the guys there from the neighborhood he was the only one around, and I said, "Hey man, where's all the weed at?" And he's like, "Oh, there's no weed." He's like, "There's no weed right now. All there is this." And he had a torch and a pookie. And for those of you that don't know what a pookie is, that's another word for a meth pipe. So he had a torch and a meth pipe, and he said, This is all we have." He's like, "You can smoke some of this." And I was like, "Man, I never smoked that." And I've seen what it did to people. And I was kind of nervous about it, but I was more nervous about not getting high. So I said, "You know what? I'll try it." And I became addicted immediately. After one hit of meth, it took over. That's all I wanted to do was smoke meth. And I still cared about graffiti, but meth was my main focus. So I started smoking meth. With the meth smoking, you need money to stay high. You need money to keep smoking meth. And what I started doing was I started getting into stealing cars. I was stealing cars every day. I was stealing, sometimes I would steal 2 or 3 cars a day. Became very addicted. I became I was running from the police all the time. I was living in a violent lifestyle, doing all kinds of things that somebody that grew up in a nice home like me, even though it was rocky, I was living a whole different life of what I wanted to live. I was going to jail. I was stealing cars. I was involved in all kinds of violence. Things went downhill. Now, one day, finally, I got picked up on a warrant. So I went to jail, and all night, I dreamt about my dad. And immediately when I woke up, I knew my dad had passed away. And that was a rough time for me because, he was sick, and I never went to go visit him. And I just always had a grudge in my heart against him. And when he died while I was in jail, it made me feel like I was never going to be able to make things right with him ever again. So luckily I got out of jail, and I was able to get in touch with my family, and they told me they did confirm that he died, even though I knew it when I woke up because I was dreaming about him all night. I knew when I woke up that he had passed away. And I remember getting in touch with my family, and I think it was my sister, maybe it was my sister or my brother, but they said, "Hey, we want you to come to the wake, but there's only one thing you need to promise." And I said, "What is that?" And they said, "Don't come high. You can't come high." And if you know anything about getting high or being addicted to meth, that's pretty much the only promise you can't keep. You can't keep a promise that you ain't gonna get high. So I showed up to the wake. I showed up with sunglasses. It was nighttime. I was super tweaked out. So tweaked out that my mom tried to come and give me a hug and try to console me and grieve with me, and I didn't even hug her back. And basically I started a fight at the wake between my mom's side of the family and my dad's side of the family. The police ended up coming. I ended up leaving. I stole a car. I don't know whose car it was. I stole a car from that mortuary, and I went on another run. What happened during that run, I started stealing way more cars. I started smoking way more meth. I started doing way more violent activities, and I ended up stealing a vacation van. And this is one of those big old vacation vans with the curtains on the side, and a van that no tweaker would ever have. One with TVs in it. I'm not sure if you've ever seen one of those big old vacation vans, but that's the kind of van I was in. So I stole that van, and I ended up stealing it on a Saturday night. Sunday morning, I ended up in Commerce, and that's a city, close to East LA. And in that van, I was sitting in there just getting high, and I remember the sun came up, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna go see if my friends want to go to the beach. This is a nice van. Let's go have some fun. So I pulled out onto the main road. When I pulled out onto the main road, I had my Ken Griffey baseball gloves on. I always had those anytime I took a car because I didn't want to get no fingerprints on the car. I was driving in that big old van with my baseball gloves on. I pull up to a red light, and on the opposite side, a CHP pulls up. Now it's Sunday morning, 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. There's no other people on the road except for me on this side of the street and the cop on the other side of the street, and we're at a red light. I had a weapon in the car with me, or that's what they said. I don't know what if it was there or not. And I started hearing that I say it's the devil started lying to me, and he started telling me he knows this is a stolen car. The cop's across the way, but he knows this is a stolen car, and he's about to pull you over, and you're gonna get in trouble not just for the stolen car, but for everything you ever done. And I was like, nah, that can't be. And that seemed like the longest red light in the history of red lights. So I'm stuck at the light, and I got this voice in my head telling me, you gotta go, it's over for you. So even though I'm at this red light, we're the only ones on the street, I'm sitting at the red light, and I hit the gas, and I just go for it. I run the red light right in front of the CHP. He turns around. All kinds of other CHP pop out of nowhere. I'm on a high-speed chase going from Commerce to East LA to Montebello. Finally, there's a ghetto bird above us, and on that trip, I have the gun on my lap, and I have a thought that says it'd be better to kill myself than to go to jail for all those things I've ever done. And I started hearing these voices: kill yourself. That's the only best way. That's the only way out. That's your only option. Just kill yourself. So I grew up believing that if you killed yourself, you went to hell. And so I started thinking about that. And so I just threw it out the window, supposedly, And I ended up turning onto a dead end with the wall at the end. I'm going about 50 miles per hour in a big old vacation van. I made a wrong turn. All these police are behind me. Now, with my tweaker mind, I thought the best option was to jump out of the van and let the van keep going so I could try to evade the police. So I jump out of the van at 50 miles per hour. The van hits a wall. A light post falls on the van. It's crazy. The police come out. They get their weapons on me, and they end up taking me in. So I'm in jail. I go to court. The judge says you could either get 7 years and 7 years and be on parole, or you can get 1 year, 3 felonies, and you have to go to treatment. So I said, okay, I'll pick 1 year. 1 year versus 7 seemed like a no-brainer to me. I get 1 year. I'm in jail. I get out like 6 months, and the whole time I'm calling my mom and I'm telling her, hey mom, when I get out, I'm gonna come home, right? She's like, yeah, you're gonna come home, but you got to go to rehab first. So I said, all right, just make sure it's not Christian rehab. Make sure it doesn't have nothing to do with God, and I'll go. Because in my mind, the best option for me, at that point, I felt like I was pretty good at stealing. So stealing became my main stealing and meth were my main thing, but I was always into stealing even before meth. So I felt like the meth is what got me caught. But if I wasn't smoking meth, man, I could be a way better thief. So I figured, you know what? I should go to rehab. That way I could stop smoking meth and just be a really good thief. So I agreed to it, and I told her, you know what? I'll go as long as it's not a Christian men's home or a Christian rehab, because I knew she was always praying for me. She was always trying to get me to go to church. So she said, okay, just when you come home, we're gonna call and we're gonna get you to a place. So finally, I got out on a Friday. I said, all right, I'm ready to come home. She's like, you can be here for the weekend, but on Monday you're going to a rehab. I said, okay, as long as it's not a Christian rehab. So Monday comes, she wakes me up. She says, are you ready to go to rehab? I said, yeah, I'm ready. Just make sure it ain't a Christian rehab. I didn't want anything to do with God. And so she sits there faking like she's on the phone, calling all these places. And she said, oh, you don't have room for a 21-year-old male struggling with meth? Okay, all right, thank you. So she did that like 3 or 4 times. And then she says, hey, none of the places I know of are going to be able to take you. They don't have room for you. The only place that I know of that has room for you is this Christian one, and you ain't staying here. So she tricked me into going to the Christian one. When I went to that rehab, my whole mind was closed off to religion, God. I didn't want anything to do with that. I just wanted to get off drugs. Well, what happened there was God ended up getting my attention. And this is what got my attention. I burned my bridge with my family. My dad, I messed up my dad's funeral. Every time I was with my friends, the police were showing up. So my friends didn't want me around. My family, I already burned my bridges with them. So I literally felt like I'm 21 years old. I should have my whole life ahead of me, but I have nothing. All my bridges are burned. I'm worthless. I don't have nothing going for me. And this Pastor Jason Lozano, he gets up and he starts talking about how God has a plan for me and how God loves me and how God's not done with me. And I felt like the whole room was empty and he was only talking to me. And what happened was he would preach it so much day after day after day that I started to believe it. And I started to ask myself, what purpose does God have for me? What could God do with me? And I was supposed to leave that home in 3 months because, that's what my commitment was. But when the 3 months came, my mom said, hey, you ready to come home? I said, no, I'm not ready yet. And she said, why not? And I said, I just don't feel like I'm ready yet. I feel like I need to figure out what I'm here for. So she said, okay. So then 6 months came. She said, you ready to come home yet? I said, no, I'm not ready to come home yet. And she said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm just going to stay here as long as I need to till I figure out my purpose. And I ended up being there for a total of 5 years. 5 years I was in there and just trying to figure out my purpose. And for all those years I was in the men's home, I didn't have to figure out how I was going to pay rent. I didn't have to figure out how I was going to eat. I was being transported in a van. I never put no gas. And it was just like the Good Samaritan when, someone else paid for that person to get better. And that's literally what happened to me. I didn't have insurance. I didn't have anything. Someone just helped me get better. And, a few years later, I went to Pastor Jason Lozano's door for Father's Day. And I said, hey, Pastor, my dad passed away, but you've been a father figure in my life. So I just wanted to bring you a gift for Father's Day. And I said, whatever I could do to repay you, please just let me know, because I got my life back. And he said, Isaac, you don't got to give me nothing. Just do this one thing for me. And I said, what is it? And he said, the same thing I did for you, go do it for somebody else. And so that's when I found my purpose. I said, you know what? I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I'm going to help other people people that were quit, people that were abandoned, people that were rejected, people that were left behind, people that didn't have, that were struggling with addiction or mental health. I'm gonna help them the same way I was helped. And so, man, I ended up getting married. I ended up having my children. Now, fast forward, that was like 18 or 19, almost 19 years ago. And now we have Solace Treatment Center where we're able to help people every single day of the week. We have a detox, we have an outpatient, we have a mental health outpatient, and we're helping hundreds of people every single month. And we recently also, I was a part of starting up another thing called Healing Place. And Healing Place is where people get to come who are just like me 18 years ago, who were struggling with addiction, struggling with mental health issues, and they didn't have no options. And we started up these programs for men and for women, and it's free, and you don't have to pay a dime. And you can come to these places, and the same thing that was done for me, now we're able to do it for others. And the only way, I know a lot of people, some people don't believe in God, some people have their own opinions about God, but nobody can convince me that God isn't real and God doesn't love us. He's a God of second chances. And, using my story isn't necessarily a religious thing. It's not it's not anything like that. But I would be doing everybody a disservice if I didn't tell people how I got the help that I got. My help came from the house of God. It came from church. It came from a guy named Jason Lozano. And now using my story is all about that. It's all about giving people hope. It's all about sharing with people that they're not alone, and literally taking not just my story, but taking all kinds of people's stories. People send in their stories all the time, and we share their stories. Some people lost their battle with addiction. Some people have lost their battle with mental health. And there's also a whole bunch of other people that are winning their battle or won their battle, and they're helping other people win their battle. And that's all this is. It's a community. It's a platform where we get to share the miracles that happen in our life, and we invite other people to listen to it and watch the videos and listen to the stories, because the same type of freedom we got, you can get it too. And the same way we came out of those struggles, you can come out of those struggles too. If you have a brother or a sister or a mom or a dad, a relative that you think is hopeless, that there's nothing for them and there's no way out, it's not true. It's not true. Once again, thanks again for being a part of this, listening, sharing, and I hope my story helps somebody. Please, if you're a parent, you're a mom, don't give up on your kids. I'm the result of a praying mother. I'm the result of a place called Freedom City Church, where, even the darkest of stories can go in there and come out as a miracle. My whole life is a miracle, and we're just trying to help other people get the same thing. So I really appreciate you watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.